Okay.
because they did not provide us with mics. So we got ours and it's connected to the live stream. So whoever is talking, they should use this one. Otherwise, on the live stream, it will not be heard.
Okay, so what we're going to do is that we're going to just cross this. Okay. No worries. But you have to talk a little bit loud, right?
Is it on?
Is it on? Can we test? Okay.
No, 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 we can't test because we are live streaming.
Yes.
Before, once menu starts, I think she will announce, right?
Yes.
Yeah, she can like at time I will tell her.
Tá, mulher?
Thank you. Thank you. So can you tell them about
Ok, I'm going to. Não, peraí, tem que botar na ordem, viu? Tá, a gente vai falar? Um assim, então vai falar. Então vamos botar um assim. Mulher, vamos fazer aqui. A gente pode puxar e botar mais uma pra cá? É. Bota mais uma cadeira ali. La seule chose, Alex, c'est comme c'est télétransmis. Acho que sim. Ah, mas acho que
dis-leur de filmer le haut, pas le bas.
Non, mais il n'y a pas de souci. Juste, il faut que tu parles dans le micro. Ça va pas faire du bruit dans la salle, mais c'est pour le. Oui.
Il faut que je tienne un micro alors en
Ouais,
plus du papier.
Oui, tout à fait. Ce qui est jeune. Okay, thank you very much.
Eu vou ser o primeiro? Não, mas eu deve ser o último.
Primeiro, venha no assistente aqui.
Trouxe meu computador, vou ficar olhando nesse mini celular e me embananando. Não tinha como, porque eu vou ter que ir daqui pro jantar. Ter que ler nesse mini celular.
Hello? No. Ah. Okay. Bom. Hello everyone. My name is Tarim Motoverne. I'm professor at Federal University of Ceará. I'm delighted to be here with you today. I am professor at Federal University in the Northeast region in Brazil, where I teach and research in sea law. Today, panels delves into the crucial intersection of ocean and climate justice. This session will explore the imperative of equitable and fair solutions in addressing the challenges faced by our ocean in the context of the climate change. Join us are intimate experts who will share their insights and perspectives on how we can navigate towards a more just and sustainable future for our ocean. Why this is a relevant question? Because the ocean is the largest living space on Earth and a fundamental part of our planetary climate system. The ocean provides essential services that help mitigate the impact of the climate emergency, and it is crucial to protect and preserve the health of marine ecosystems to ensure a more resilient and sustainable future in face of ongoing challenge climate. These are some key aspects highlighting its importance: carbon sequestration, weather patterns and storm regulation, biodiversity and ecosystem services, food security, sea level regulation, renewable energy potential. Because of these different elements related to the oceans, we need to think of concrete steps taken to curb anthropogenic disruptions that interfere with the ocean natural function, including overfishing, habitat destruction, and marine pollution. We have to admit the ocean have not been in the center of the discussion at the COP. On the contrary, there has been a little or no discussion in 28 years regarding the integration of ocean and climate change agendas. Also, the states' nationally determined contribution lack specific commitment about the ocean in the context of climate change related public policies. Therefore, we are here today to include the ocean theme in the climate agenda. Our panel has many Brazilian stakeholders, and this is on purpose. The new Brazilian administration has put the Blue Amazon at the heart of its international climate agenda. As you know, the Blue Amazon refers to the Brazilian maritime region with a size that is close to the size of the United States territory. Beyond in its economic importance, the Blue Amazon is home to a diverse set of marine organisms possessing biotechnological potential. These organisms offer applications in various sectors, including cosmetic, food, and agriculture. In a sense, the concept of the Blue Amazon underscores the critical need to comprehend and sustainably manage Brazil's vast marine ecosystems. So, Julia?
Thank you very much, Professor Montaverne. So this is the idea for the main panel, right? We want to give some voice to the ocean and integrate the climate and the ocean agendas that have been separated for a while, for the last 28 years here at the COP, and are completely absent from the nationally determined contributions. There are actually these statements, the commitments that were taken by states, right? So against this very difficult background, it is my real pleasure to introduce to you the first speaker, Moacir Araújo. He has several hats, but he's the general coordinator for climate in Brazil, and he's also a researcher at the Federal University of Pernambuco. And I think one of the main issues here, and because he's coming from Brazil, is what is finally considering this current agenda, political agenda in Brazil, what is currently Brazil's role in connecting this global and ocean agenda from an individual, regional, and even multilateral level, right? Finally, what is Brazil doing currently? Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. My name is Moacir Araújo, and I'm glad to be here discussing a little bit more about ocean, which is a passion for myself because I'm someone that work with ocean since long time ago, and I was really happy to be here, and I thank the Sorbonne University and all colleagues to share this place, this time with me. I think that the first thing that we should put in mind is that we need to have a stronger cooperation in ocean and climate actions. So when we take a look on the last 10 to 15 years, we have made a lot of progress, sure. And I would like to stress two main agreements that we have signed. The first one in the scope of our Atlantic Alliance, that is a concept involving all nations around the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. And the first one is the Galway Statement, looking to the cooperation and more specifically between US, Canada, and European Union. And the second one is the Belém Statement that involved Brazil, South Africa, and also the European Union. So we start from that since 6-7 years ago. To improve the cooperation all over the basin, involving also African countries and so on. And this is a very important point that should be stressed in considering cooperation in science and ocean literacy. That is very important. When we take a look on Brazil, we may say that we have the same Amazon that we have in the green way we are talking about, but the blue one. So we have more or less the same area. That's unbelievable what we have to explore to understand more and more than we know until today. So Brazil is really involved and concerned by the oceans, by the ocean as some pillar for the development. And in particular from the last year when we started to discuss it involved in this framework, the ocean. And this is a very important. And as a way to do this is the political issue. We need really to discuss on political level and higher political level, because if you don't do that, we are not able to make change. And we are very happy because now we have this in Brazil. I mean, ocean becomes more and more to be as some specific issues in different ministries in Brazil. And this is the way that we found to be more effective concerning all the efforts. I mean, coordinate all effort, have an ocean in the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, in the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation that I am concerned a little bit more, and in the Ministry of Industry and the Ministry of Cities and so on, that we have this specific look on the ocean. And for the first time, I would argue to say that this is the first time that you have that in our country. And I'm very happy, proud to do that, because we need it. That not only because it's beautiful, it is beautiful, but it's mainly because we need it. We have a long 8,500 kilometers, more or less, of coastline. We can imagine how many people are involved in and work with the ocean and the coastal zone. So I think that this is a second message that we should pass through to this panel. And one third concern that is now I'm more specific concerning the external function that we have experimented now is really the change that we have concerning all the geophysical phenomenon. So when we take a look, for example, in the Enso El Nino oscillation, and that we have El Nino, La Nina, and so on in Pacific, we should not forget that most then the half of the area on the tropical planet is in the Pacific. So it really take an influence, a very strong influence all over the world, and in Brazil in particular. But when you take a look on that, look into the climate change, because now I'm also coordinator from the Brazilian Research Network on climate change, Rede Clima. When I take a look on the evolution of this El Nino, El Niña, you see that you have very different characteristics in the past when compared to what we have now. From the mid of the last century, we start to have different La Niña that feed, I would say, a very strong El Nino, like this one that you are seeing now. This is a very strong effect in consequence. In particular, in Brazil, we are now passing through the most important drought in the Amazon that you have never seen before. We are having also a strong drought in the northeast part of the Brazil, because the convergence zone, intertropical convergence zone, cannot be southward, move southward because of the El Nino, and very strong events and rainfall anomalies, positive anomalies in the south part of Brazil. So we should, we need to understand that the ocean drives everything. So it is really clear. And when we take a look on the past copies that we have been living, we see that we are now in the Oceanocene. I would argue to say that we are not in the Anthropocene. We are now in the Oceanocene. So for the start, that's what I'd like to say. And once more, thank you to be here with you.
Can I ask another question to Monsieur? Do you mind? Okay, because thank you very much, because you were talking, for me, a very important point is the political will, right? We can see very clearly, especially in Brazil, for the last 4 years, there was one situation, and now we have all of these new actions, public policies, but especially for the last year, we've seen the adoption of a decision. The Brazilian government adopted a decision on to develop marine spatial planning. Yes, so this is important because in order to develop any activity in this huge blue Amazon that we're calling now, we need data, right? We need to have data. We have to collect them. We have to collect the data. We have to use this data to plan, right? Whatever you do with this region, and of course, all of the public policies must come from this data, right? And Brazil, this huge blue Amazon, until now, did not have any specific data concerning or regional ones. So this is something really important for the development of any activity, future activity in the blue Amazon, but also for the preservation of this area. I would just now ask you as a scientist, could you just give us general overview about your feeling about this decision and what your intake? Thank you.
Yeah, this is a very good question. I can use the last commitment we have, the last law we performed, passed through the Congress, through the Parliament, about wind farmer, offshore wind farmer. Only to have an idea what we're talking about, today we have around 70 70% of all energy produced in Brazil, hydroelectric, hydropower, wind, solar, and photovoltaic, and so on, biomass, etc., and they are proposed to be offshore wind power plant. Those 70% of all energy. We have already a very clean metrics, energetical metrics, one of the cleaners of the world. But now we are just discussing about MSP, marine spatial planning, and we were working. I give some insights about that with the Congress, the Brazilian Congress, to have a law specific to offshore wind farmers. So what we did, we put inside of that law the needs of marine spatial planning. So I think that's a very good example how science and how marine activity can be involved with data collection, because they need. The only reason, I'm sure to say that, but the main reason that you do that, observations and modeling and so on, that because we put inside of the law marine spatial planning. We have the intention, we have the plan to make that all over the Blue Amazon in Brazil, starting in the south region of the Brazil. And south region, in my opinion, we should start with the north part of Brazil. But anyway, they decided to start with the south. But and if you take a look at all the laws that we are creating, modifying, and so on, you put inside some constraints concerning, for example, marine spatial planning, you'll be sure that they will do that. So this is an example about that.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for thank you very much for all of this wonderful news from Brazil. So one of the main legacies from this COP28 will be certainly the COP28 Dubai Ocean Declaration that was adopted last week, the first week of the COP. And this Ocean Declaration, I think it's important because it gives us great momentum, because it creates this accelerated scientific research and technology development program, long-standing, to foster this global and even regional system of infrastructure, viability for all of the research and technology that we need to protect the oceans, right? So I believe, I strongly, this will be one of the main legacies from the COP28. And of course, theoretical and empirical research, this is what we do at university. It's of course indispensable to address climate change issues, but it is also as important to apply them to real projects, right? And this is the role of technology, right? So technology and access to technology from southern countries, they play an important role in accelerating the decarbonization of activities related to the blue economy, and they are indispensable. And I do believe that the potential here is endless, right? We're just starting to understand the amount of opportunities that will be brought through the oceans and the technology that is being developed. So we have the pleasure to have someone here who is a specialist of technology and climate change. So I invite Jana Maria Brito. She's the head of the ESG department at Cubo Itaú, to enlighten us a little bit about how technology can accelerate the decarbonization of activities related to this new blue economy, because there's the blue Amazon, but also the blue economy, right? So how, Jana, how this technology could actually help us accelerate the decarbonization of the different activities that are currently being run under the blue economy in the oceans?
Thank you, Julia. Thank you for this invitation, Professor Tarim, Professor Julia. It's a very pleasure to speak for you. Like Moacir, it's a passion for me. Talk to about the new technologies, sustainable new technologies. I think we have 2 points about this. The first point is about the conservative sector. The maritime port is a sector very conservative and resistant to innovation. So it's complicated when we need it, when we think this is not for me. The technology is not for me. It's for the new generation. It's for the youngs. It's not for me. And the technology is for us. The innovation is a process, and we need starting the process, the education process for the innovation. It's not easy. It's not evident. So it's complicated. And we need to face the reality that new technologies, it's something isn't obvious or generational. We already think it's not for me. And the second point is about we need to understand that the large chips don't make little curves, show sharp turns. And startups and scale-ups and the small business, it's functioning like a jet ski, capable to testing and scale the technology for use by large companies. So it's a process. The simple use of AI to optimize chip routes already reduces emissions by 18%. It's by understanding this process that will transition to real carbon economy for the oceans. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you very much. And concerning this technology development in order to, exploit the blue economy, I think one of the main issues in the agenda is understanding how this the ocean and the blue economy could be fully integrated in the climate financing agenda, because we need not only financing, but adequate financing, adequate to the challenges that are being faced by the blue economy, to support all of the initiatives aimed at, for instance, conserving the marine, biodiversity, to protect sustainable fisheries management, or even to reduce pollution in the ocean, just like the photo. Whenever we invest in the protection of oceans, we not only preserve biodiversity, but we also ensure, and this is important, that the livelihood of coastal communities are also protected. And then whenever you protect these people, it's the overall health of the whole planet is also protected. So financing, blue financing, and adequate blue financing is a strategic investment to our environment, and also a key element for all of the global efforts concerning climate change. So I would like to hand the floor to Ana Ibarra. She's the Executive Director of the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research, and she will tell us a little bit about climate finance and the ocean. No? Yeah? Funding for climate, sorry. Climate finance and finance to the research on the ocean, sorry. yeah. Not private, but of course, public finance.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to join this really important discussion. So the IAI, the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research, which I serve, we are an intergovernmental organization with 19 member states from the Americas, established more than 30 years ago, with the mission of supporting scientific information, the production of science for decision making by our member states. And so I am supported by a science advisory committee, science policy advisory committee, and we work directly for our governments, our focal points. And it has come up in recent years, the necessity and the priority of shifting and putting an emphasis in funding for ocean science. And this has been loud and clear from both our science advisory bodies and from our member states. I should say that from our origins, the IAI funded quite a bit of ocean science and monitoring and modeling. This was definitely a pillar of our science agenda. A lot of the work that happened in the Southern Atlantic was supported for many years by the IAI. But over the history of the organization, there have there's been the realization that we need to incorporate directly the human dimensions, social, cultural, economic aspects, spiritual aspects within science. And so this brings us to where we are today, which is a focus on transdisciplinary science. Transdisciplinary science meaning that we work across social sciences, biophysical sciences, and with actors from communities, governments, private sector to co-develop the science to address the challenges around oceans and other priority topics for our member states. And so at our Conference of the Parties this past June in Panama, a decision was adopted by our parties to develop a program on oceans, islands, and coastal areas. Again, this came from recommendations from our science advisory bodies, which really raised not only the challenges that we're facing, but also the potential to work with an ocean agenda as a unifying agenda, as an agenda that really brings together many of our member states to work in a common direction to address challenges around climate, biodiversity, poverty, inequality, and justice, but now through the ocean lens. And this was also purposefully aligned with the UN Decade on Oceans and with funding calls that we knew were coming down the pipeline. And so this takes you to the question that you asked me. So the IAI is also the host of a consortium of global science funding agencies called the Belmont Forum. The Belmont Forum brings together about 35 different global science funding agencies, and they launch what are called collaborative research actions on topics that the funding agencies come together and identify as priorities. And we've had about 20 different collaborative research actions that have been launched over the last 13 years. So we knew that there was potentially an oceans funding call coming, and just 3 weeks ago at the Belmont Forum plenary, ALENVI, the French science funding agency, proposed a new funding call on oceans, and it was accepted. And so there will be the development of a new global funding call. IAI will support the development of that funding call to ensure that the priorities of Latin America and the Caribbean are appropriately represented by bringing in actors from across the region in the development process. So that development of that global funding call will begin in 2024 and will carry through to 2025, when we hope to launch it during the Global Oceans Conference, which will occur in France. And so this gives us a very clear timeline. And as we develop this consortium of global funding agencies, we from the IAI know the importance of also building capacity in the region to respond when a funding call is issued. So it's not just about launching the funding call, but it's about building the capacity. So doing training and supporting the creation of transdisciplinary networks. We do this through virtual online training, through in-person training workshops and seed grants. We've done the same for previous funding calls. And by doing this, we can begin to change the funding landscape so that new teams, groups that have been historically marginalized and excluded from science, can begin to have a more active role and really shift, again, the funding landscape to address issues of equity and inequities. Again, the concept of justice. We also have to come at it from the science funding and the science landscape. We have to shift it. Otherwise, the same usual suspects will continue to be funded and carry out the research and thereby drive the agenda. And so this is really important for us. At the same time, to close with this, I'll mention that the IAI is also establishing this year, our parties have asked us to establish for the first time an advisory committee comprised of indigenous peoples and local communities. And so this new committee will sit with our science advisory committee and our science policy advisory committee to drive the science agenda for the Americas. And so we're really excited about this and see this as a potential to transform science in the Americas.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? It's so interesting. Yeah, no, on finance. No, but this is so interesting because, and I speak at the other side of the road because, I am a researcher. So of course I'm always interested when you talk about finance and you have this finance institution. I have questions, important questions that impact my day-to-day life and activity. So when you're talking about criteria and how you organize this financing of research, etc., I was just wondering, how do you take into account the Global South researchers? Meaning, do you believe now, because of course the ocean is very equal, they have many states, especially from the Global South and small islands, their researchers are having difficulties, financing their work, and even even just to go abroad and find. How do you think is a general overview of research financing for Global South researchers, and even do you think there is any specific role for private companies? Right? Do you think they could be do they have any role in financing research, and what kind of research? And is there any currently? We don't see many public partnerships in this area, but do you think there's room for this, and what could be the challenges that we could, especially developing countries who are, no, the global south, who are still lacking funding? And this is the researcher asking.
That's a good question.
No, that's a very good question. And I think that is one of the main challenges that the executive director of the Belmont Forum, Nicole Arbour, has put this at the front and center of her agenda, is to bring in more funding for the Global South in the different Belmont Forum funding calls. From the II's perspective, we fund our member states in Latin America and the Caribbean. And so that's because we have, our member states also include the US and Canada, but we place an emphasis on Latin America and the Caribbean. So we will have funding available in this funding call, similar to the other funding calls that we have ongoing. What we've seen in the past, for example, is that Future Earth has also come in and funded the member states the II doesn't fund. So we try to kind of matchmake to give good coverage to the Americas. But we still need to find more funders. And actually would ask this room to think if there are funders who would be interested in coming into this funding call to help us identify who those partners might be. And private sector is very much invited, but they have not played a big role historically in the funding calls. More recently, we've been able to bring in intergovernmental agencies like Pan American Health Organization or the WMO are participating in some of the funding calls. They're not providing money, but they're providing in-kind support. So there are different ways that partners can come and provide resources that are not just financial resources. I will say that one of the newest Belmont Forum members is the state of Santa Catarina of Brazil. They just joined 3 weeks ago, and they are incredibly excited to work on the Oceans Call. They see this as a huge priority, and so there will be more funding for Brazil through Santa Catarina. FAPESP is a long-term member of the Belmont Forum, certainly a leader. But we need to do more to bring in more funding for the Global South, for sure.
Just out of curiosity, why do you think there's so little funding from private, for the ocean research from private?
Specifically in the Belmont Forum mechanism, I can say, and I can't speak to everything, but I think it's been driven by sort of the national science funding agencies in its origins, and some of the logic maybe comes so the private sector doesn't see their role. Also, it requires that everybody agree on a common review and selection process. The private sector and the philanthropies may not necessarily want to give up control, right? Because there's a peer review process. So the beauty of the Belmont Forum process is that you can have 20 science funding agencies come together and say, okay, we agree to follow a common review and selection process. You know, there's a common peer review process, and when the recommendations come out of that, then the funders basically agree to go by the recommendations of this expert panel, which is comprised of experts who all of the funding agencies have nominated. So there's like a collective pool. But it does mean that you have to kind of step back and say, yes, I agree to this collective process. Some funding agencies don't want to do that, right? Like they want to say, well, we're going to fund A, B, and C, and we're going to select. So I think there are some challenges there, but it's not insurmountable. There's also some maybe education that has to happen about what is the benefit. Like, why would you want to go through the extra work of participating in this kind of collaborative scheme? And the answer is that every dollar you put in, there's a multiplier. Because if you, like, if the II, for example, we put in $100,000 into a project, we know that that project will also come with $400,000 from the US or with $300,000 from FAPESP, because it's a funding consortium. And so each dollar that I put in, there's a multiplier. And that's the beauty of this funding scheme. Last thing I will mention, though, I'm kind of looping back to the climate finance. We did actually begin working on the climate finance question because our member states and our advisory bodies indicated the importance of addressing sargassum. And so we started working almost 2 years ago with CAF, with the Development Bank CAF, to put together a proposal for the GEF, a multi-country proposal to address integrated sargassum management. So we see that as an emerging priority, and for our member states, it's crippling some of the small island countries and many of the countries around the Caribbean that are especially tourism dependent. So sargassum is an area that we've begun to work quite actively in.
Thank you very much, Anna. So one last issue that we'd like to talk about with you today is the fact that, well, currently almost all states are adopting public policies, right, concerning, well, either marine protection, protection of marine biodiversity, or special planning. I mean, almost all states in the world have something to do or a public policy concerning the ocean, right? And for us, one of most important topics now is to compel governments to implement these measures or to implement more impactful measures in safeguarding the oceans against all of the impacts of climate change. So this topic specifically is currently being studied under the name of climate justice, which is a very broad concept, but it could be understood also as this idea of advocating in order to, let's say, press a little bit more governments in order to be a little bit, more active and more effective whenever implementing public policies related to the oceans or biodiversity or whatever. And this is a very topical issue. We have been watching in the medias before any kind of court in any place in the world. There are people trying to fight either against, any issues they believe are unjust or even unfair, or even, public policies that they don't think are adapted to climate change or especially to protection of the oceans. So we have we have brought to you today a specialist, Professor Alix Perrin from Université Paris-Dauphine. And she's a specialist on climate justice, especially in France. She works with the French tribunals, and she analyzes the cases in French tribunals that concern climate justice. And we would like with you to share your valuable insights on the topic of climate justice and the oceans, and particularly how could we compel the governments to implement and to adopt and to foster impactful measures concerning the oceans against all of these issues concerning climate change. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. So I am very glad to be here. So we won't go into the case before the European Court, but what's happened before the French judge is instructive. The French court are increasingly being called upon by Environmental Protection Association for this purpose. For the past 5 years, climate lawsuits have been at the heart of legal and media news in France. These are very specific type of litigation. The aim is to penalize a failure by the public authority to act. More precisely, a partial failure to act. The public authorities act, but not sufficiently. This is why is special about this legal action, because finally we are asking a judge to assess the effectiveness of public policy. In reality, the judge is being asked to force the state not just to act, but above all to do more and to do it better, even beyond the international commitments it has made. In French law, as all major democracies, the principle of the separation of powers prohibits judges from acting as legislators or deciding in place of the government. The judge applies the law, settles a dispute by applying the law, but that's all. He can make injunction and penalty payment order, but the injunction, the order can be used to order new public policy. That's why the judge has very little room to act, and the same for plaintiff association. If we ask the judge to behave like a legislator, like a decision maker, the action will be rejected. Associations involved in climate actions must therefore learn to focus their claims and arguments correctly. That's the point. In order to apply to a court, an association must establish that it has an interest in taking action. In general, the interest to act is a sort of litigation lock for association. But the French court are very flexible in their assessment of interest in bringing an action. The French legislator, has created a presumption of interest to act for this association. But this doesn't mean that they can ask for just any measures to be taken. Everything depends on the statute of the association. Under French law, there are three main types of legal action that association can take against the public authorities. And under French law, these actions are brought before an administrative judge. There is a summary procedure, the name is référé liberté, which allows a judge to order the government to make any measure to put an end to a fundamental freedom. And in 2022, the Conseil d'État established a new fundamental freedom, the right of everyone to live in a balanced environment that respects the earth. Henceforth, associations can now invoke this right to bring an action. But in my point of view, this action has little chance of succeeding in a climate trial because it's complicated, but French judge wants a particular urgency. A particular urgency must to be established. In our case, it's quite difficult. So we need to think about another remedy. The second remedy is an action for annulment of an administrative decision, often a refusal to act. And then the judge will, for example, the Conseil d'État overturn the government refusal to act and order him to draw up an air quality plan to achieve the directive objective. And he said to the government, do more than simply draw up air quality plan. You know what is interesting? The judge adopts a concrete approach to examine whether the legal measures taken by the government are sufficient. Then, in 2022, the Conseil d'État enjoins the government to curb the curve of greenhouse gas emission in order to comply with its objective. Finally, there is a third remedy, a claim for compensation to condemn the state to repair the damage of its climate inaction. And Paris Administrative Court do it in 2021. And so when the states cause a prejudice, that's the point. When the state causes a prejudice and the fault at the origin of the prejudice persists, the judge can condemn the state in addition to damage to take measures to stop the prejudice. In environmental matters, the judge may also order measures of repairing in kind. That is interesting. So, are their actions effective? politically, yes, it's significant pressure on the government. From legal point of view, yes, but. First, you need to choose the right legal recourse. There is, but you have to choose the good one. And secondly, the most important for me, you need to identify the legal obligation on which the association are basing their action. To oblige the government to do something, you need to base your action on sufficiently precise legal obligation. If the obligation is too general, the action will not succeed. So, associations are sometimes disappointing. Even if they win their cases, the court injunctions are too general or the fines are not paid. This can change. We need to put pressure on the French and European legislator to obtain legal obligation, perhaps fewer in numbers, but more specific and more precise. And then climate trials will be more effective. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alex. Was such an enlightening speech because integrating climate justice principles in French legislation and in French case law, I think it ensures that the burden of addressing climate change is shared equitably. Especially when tribunals say, as you said, say to governments, do better, and then the same governments on their turn, they say to companies, do better. And there's a whole chain of doing better that becomes, and I do think this is one of the, nicest thing we can do as the civil society, to go before tribunals and require governments to do better and start a chain of doing better. I'm saying. So we managed to foster a more inclusive and effective response for states worldwide with an impact on the private sector too, which is absolutely amazing. So yeah, climate justice is a very topical issue right now, and I do believe that research should keep, studying these cases. Thank you very much. I think Professor Montaverni will wrap up our panel in the 5 minutes that we have.
I'm so proud for this panel. I think that I'm really sure that this panel has become clear that the ocean stands as a vital component of Earth's climate system, offering the essential services that play a pivotal role in mitigating the impact of the climate emergency. The protection and the preservation of the health of marine ecosystems are imperative for secure a more resilient and sustainable future in light of the ongoing challenges posed by climate change. As we progress, let us carry the inspiration and new-found insights gained here into our respective endeavors across the globe. Our journey toward a net zero emission is ongoing, and your commitment to growth and innovation of the public policies is what will push us forwards. Thank you once again for your time, for the Ocean Panel, especially Manon, for your support. It look forward to seeing the positive transformation that will for sure arise from the seeds of knowledge planted here today. The last message is we can't solve the climate crisis without the ocean. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. That's a wrap.
Let's take a picture.